Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU, Big 12, and realignment. There's certainly a lot going on with that right now, but today we are focused on Week 5 game, the matchup with BYU at Baylor. And with us, joining us tonight to talk about Baylor is Matt Workman of the Bear Den Pod, part of the 1210 Podcast Network. Matt, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Matt, real quick, where can everybody find your stuff with the Bear Den Pod?
Yeah, you can find us. Like I said, we're part of the 1012 Podcast Network. We are on Twitter at the Bear Den Pod, and we have our website is thebeardenpod.com.
I had that backwards, but okay, perfect. Well, and I'll make sure to include all those in the show notes below as well. And then also while you're down there, please go ahead and give this video a like, subscribe to the channel so you catch all our content. We do this weekly where we have the segment called Know the Foe, where we go around and we get to talk to other podcasters and from the opponent, from the fan base of the opponent that we're playing that week. And so we really appreciate those. It gives us a deeper dive and look into who we're playing and into the matchup. And then we'll also go live to do live reactions after the game, as well as our deeper analysis that we do each week early in the week, as well as all of our other content that as we have time to fit it in there. So please do subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff so you can catch all of that. Now, Matt, you are obviously, you guys have a Baylor pod. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what your background and fandom with Baylor is and what got you into starting the podcast in the first place?
Sure. So the background, like I became a Baylor fan really when I attended Baylor University. Didn't grow up a Baylor fan, was aware of them. I grew up in as you know, like Baylor is a religious institution, has ties to the Baptist church. Growing up, going to a Baptist church, we, as our little middle school youth group, would go to Baylor games. So we were aware of them. Was really as a Texas fan growing up most of my life until I went to college. And then I'm the type of guy I was I'm a diehard for my guys. And so once I was a student and now an alum of Baylor, is I'm through and through. So as far as starting the podcast, that really was the genesis of COVID lockdowns and being stuck at home. And so I'd kind of started a very generic college sports podcast, and it was really just me, and I would have people on and talk to them about college football mostly. And no one listened to it hardly. And then it was really the 21 national championship run for the basketball team. Everyone's at home. We're all online. And that's where we met. I met my co-host Joe from Twitter, and I just sent him a DM one time, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to be on a podcast with me that no one listens to?" And he's like, "Sure." And then we've been doing it. This is our 4th year. So awesome. Yeah, that's how it all started.
Awesome. That's cool that you guys, so have you guys even met in person?
Yeah. So we did the podcast for 2 years before we met in person, because like I said, the 21 season, we really followed the podcast, but it was limited. I didn't go to any games. There wasn't a lot of people going to games because they had limitations crowds and things like that still. So then in 2022, we met at a tailgate.
Okay, great.
For the first time. Now I've seen tons of times.
All right. So you guys are you guys in the Waco area?
I'm in the Waco area. He's actually in Houston, so okay. Not too far, 3 hours from Waco. So,
right. Okay, right on. And so, how did you, if you don't mind me asking, how did you end up going to Baylor? If it was on your radar, but not really your target.
So I took kind of a non-traditional path when I got out of high school. I really didn't have any interest in. So I took a gap year or 5, and was in the workforce doing other things. Ended up in Waco, and decided I wanted to go back to college. And so I started off at a junior college there in Waco, and then transferred to Baylor, and that was it.
Nice. I love it. And now you're through and through. So
yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, so let's get into Baylor now.
All right.
First of all, we got to talk about, unfortunately, how things ended last week
Oh, did
with
something happen last week?
You forgot already. That's good. Yeah. So there was this game between Baylor and Colorado, which I think
Yeah.
most of America was rooting for Baylor, probably in that one. I think Colorado kind of
Yeah.
has that impact and great viewership. But yeah, it goes to. I mean, well, I'll let you tell us what happened because I want to know what happened and what you think happened to Baylor during this because Baylor, it looked like had a pretty solid lead. I was keeping kind
Yeah.
of an eye on it as the BYU game was starting and felt
Yeah.
like, okay, Baylor just needs to lock this up. This is about all but done. And then,
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is like Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are elite college football players. Travis Hunter, maybe, in my opinion, is like the best college football player in the nation. Um, and that's one of those things is we did a pretty good job with the pass rush. Their offensive line isn't good. And we had, I think, 8 sacks
yeah,
um, on the night. And really, but could have had 15 because he's elusive. And we couldn't get him down as many sacks as we did have. So, and you just can't. Their skill players are so good with Jimmy Horn Jr. and you have like the aforementioned Travis Hunter that you can't give him that much time. You can't hold up coverage. So we had some plays like that. It was the first time that Baylor's pass defense was really tested this year. So we played Charleston State with FCS school,
Mhm.
Utah, which with Cam Rising went out after the first half, they really didn't try to throw the ball down the field at all. And then it was Air Force.
Mhm.
So this was the first team that was like a true like passing team. And so that was one thing I was worried about. But, like you said, like we jumped out, it was like 24-10, 24-17. And what it was, as I think what happened, we got that lead and the coaching staff, whoever it was, decided the third quarter decided that we just wanted to like sit on it. And I think they just wanted to sit on the ball and like take off time. They just couldn't take off enough time. Because like we didn't score any points in the third quarter and they scored their points to get caught up in the third quarter. And then to tie it in, the Hail Mary in the fourth quarter. And then of course, the thing about it is like Dominic Richardson was going in to tie it up when he fumbled in the end zone. Like he's at the goal line. And Travis Hunter is such a good football player. He knew he couldn't stop him if he tried to do like your normal tackle. So he put his helmet right on the ball and it popped right out. I mean, he's a smart football player, and those are the kind of things that happen in football.
Yes. Yeah. It does happen. It just sucks when you're on the losing end of that. So,
Yeah, especially
okay.
when you have a game won and then you lose.
So this is interesting because Baylor and BYU were both projected pretty similarly near the bottom of
Yeah,
the Big 12 prior to the season. Now Baylor coming into that or where they were positioned, had they been able to close out, would have been probably ahead of schedule where they were projected to be and put them in a good position to uh, be bowl eligible.
yeah,
Not saying that Baylor couldn't still make it happen, but it felt like that was one that you really want,
yeah,
to have in your back pocket. So now Baylor coming off a very disappointing loss. There's kind of two ways teams can respond to this. They can either, kind of fold, or they can really, with their back against the wall, really rally together and
yeah.
kind of, and come out even more determined to win. How do you see this Baylor team responding so far?
Well, from everything we've heard in player interviews throughout the week and even the post game stuff, they sound determined to like not have a repeat of last year and to put it behind them and to focus on the task in front of them and not let it linger. Because the problem with a loss like the Colorado loss is you don't want to turn one loss into two.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, everything we've heard from Coach Aranda to the players, sounds like that's what they're doing. You really don't know till Saturday, honestly. But I mean, I like what I've heard so far, and they've addressed it. And so it's good that it's on the forefront of everyone's mind that we can't let this linger, and we have to like go back and work hard and fix what needs to be fixed, and on to the next one.
Okay, that's a good lead in. So let's talk about what this team's strengths are and what does need to be fixed. So first of all,
Okay.
Dave Aranda, after that loss, there's been people have been cooling on him ever since that great run to the Sugar Bowl, and
Yeah.
his teams have struggled, especially last year. And it's been mentioned that he's on the hot seat. Um, how hot is his seat after last week, or do you think that what is the overall sentiment towards Aranda?
So it's pretty hot. Pretty hot. Like, I would say definitely, in my opinion, he would have to be at minimum bowl eligible to not have a serious conversation with the administration about a change. Because like you said, from that 2021 season, with the Sugar Bowl win, the Big 12 championship, you've gone 6-6 and 3-9, and so your trajectory's in the wrong direction. And you got to understand, like, to me, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. This isn't year 2. This is year 5. You shouldn't be having these issues in year 5, in my opinion. And I was one of the guys after 3-9. I was like, they need to make a change. I thought we should have made a change last year. That's my opinion. He's done the things that you wanted him to do in the offseason. We replaced offensive coordinator. He took over the defensive play calling. He's essentially the de facto defensive coordinator. And some of those things, and the whole NIL recruiting is uptick. NIL we've been really pushing that hard. I don't know if you've seen it, even like we have the We Pay Players stuff. Like, yeah. So like that's been things that needed to get done. So, but it's he was in a predicament of his own creation. So, I mean, if you can't have the same thing happen in year 5 that happened last year or the previous year. So it's definitely hot for sure.
Okay, and let's not get too far into it because it's too early in the season. But they've had a lot of success with the last 3 coaches, so it goes to show you can win Baylor. You can find someone new.
I mean, Aranda had success. I mean, early.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for sure.
And sometimes that's you're coming in with other guys, and so maybe that can be part of it. But
yeah, I mean, you don't have Jalen Petrie on this roster. You don't have Terrell Bernard on this roster. Those are like starting NFL players right now. So
right, that helps. So let's talk about the offense, because last year you guys had Jeff Grimes, who was previously at BYU, so we're very familiar with him. We loved him at BYU. It was when we hired him, nobody knew. We're like, I don't know, it sounds cool. We're like, if he does well, or it does, let's say if he's gone for a better opportunity in 2 to 3 years, that means we've had a lot of success under him. So be it. And that's exactly what happened. And it didn't really hold up there at Baylor, but he's now gone, and he's Kansas's problem, which I suppose
problem being the operative word there.
Which I hate to say. Like I said, we loved him. In fact, we got excited this offseason when there was some smoke around him potentially coming on as a co-offensive coordinator, because Aaron Roderick, who's now our offensive coordinator, he was still there. So it would have been, I think it was just going to be a weird dynamic to bring him back, because it's like your old, he was.
But he like the QB. Was he the QB coach? Your OC now under Grimes?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, exactly. So it would have been weird dynamic, but people were kind of excited because people are frustrated with A-Rod for various reasons. But anyway, so he brought in the new coach, and actually BYU, we've faced him as well previously, but he's known for and how do you say it? It's Spavital? Spavital. Okay.
Jake Spavital.
So he's known for some creative up-tempo offenses. Can you tell me a little bit about the identity of this Baylor offense?
So yeah, that's been the question so far. That's still up in the air because just like everyone in the country, we thought you brought in Jake Spavital. What he does good is I think he's not just a stickler for his scheme. He'll cater it to the talent he has. Like you mentioned Cal, like they weren't really good in the passing game. They had a quarterback that wasn't really good, but they had a dynamic elite inside zone running back, and that's what they accentuated with Ott over there at Cal. So I think part of the thing is like he'll take his weapons and shape the offense to what the strengths are. As far as Baylor goes, I don't really see that we've done that yet because I don't know if we have the running back on the roster because all these guys were, most of them at least, were recruited for the Grimes wide zone offense. They're not inside zone runners. They're a different style of back. So it's finding, and I think we found one with Bryson Washington who is more of that type of back who could be quick on his feet, hit the hole, get positive yardage. You know, the wide zone guys, it's kind of you have to be patient, and they're more of like outside runners. Whereas with his running game, you need guys who can also be like an inside runner. So that's been the main critique is like it seems like they are still doing kind of what Grimes did in the sense like we're going to bang our head against the wall and establish the run no matter what, which is frustrating. But and then we really haven't seen the offense that everyone envisioned. We brought in DeQuan Finn from Toledo, dynamic playmaker at Toledo. But he never looked comfortable the two games that he played. Now, granted, one of those was against Utah, who's an elite defense. But even in the first game against Tarleton, it didn't just look right. And once Sawyer Robertson came in, he's an air raid quarterback. He played in that system in high school, was recruited by Mike Leach to Mississippi State before he transferred to Baylor. And so he just looks like he has a little bit more comfort level. And it just seems it worked a lot better once he came in the game. So I think it'll continue to get better once everyone gets a more comfortable with the scheme.
Okay. All right. So, who are any players to watch? Some that maybe you didn't mention that we should kind of
Okay.
keep our eyes on.
I would say definitely Ketron Jackson, wide receiver. He's outside receiver. Ashton Hawkins, inside receiver. Monterey Baldwin, very fast inside receiver. And Michael Trigg, tight end. He is a transfer. I think he started at USC, transferred to Ole Miss, and now he's like a third-time transfer guy at Baylor.
Okay. All right. So, against this BYU defense, like what will need to go right for Baylor in this game? Like, if Baylor wins, what will have gone right for this offense? Like, if you can kind of boil it down.
I think you would have to have further development of the offensive line in both run blocking and pass blocking. So like they've been pretty rough so far this year. And I think it helps. Like I think from what I've seen of BYU, they play a lot of the similar defense, like as far as like their coverages where like Colorado did, right? So you're gonna play a lot of like man, right? So what you're gonna have to do is win your matchups, especially the wide receivers. You're gonna have to win your matchups, but the offensive lines have to give Sawyer enough time to get the ball to his guys, which he really didn't have against Colorado. I mean, that ball has to be out like 2.5 seconds because that's all he's got before someone's in his face. And so we really need our offensive line to develop further and make some strides in the pass blocking, but also in run blocking, open the holes so that we can take advantage of the inside run. so that we can set up the pass game.
I'm glad you mentioned the O-line because I forgot to ask about our old friend Campbell Barrington. So, what are your thoughts on the Barrington brothers who transferred from BYU?
Clark last year was a little bit spotty at times, but that was across the board, and they're doing a lot of mixing and matching. Campbell, he's probably one of our best defensive linemen.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, also it's like Baylor's kind of really made a living on getting BYU transfers. So like those guys are going to be mature and they're going to be physical, and that's what we need. That's what we were missing in our offensive line, is like you need guys who has a little bit of a mean streak and a little bit of an attitude. And a lot of times I think when you get, especially linemen from BYU, you know what you're going to get, and that's kind of what you need to set that tone for the group as a whole.
So, all right. So let's flip it to the other side of the ball now. Defense, as you mentioned, Dave Aranda, who everyone recognizes as a very sharp defensive mind, is now essentially the defensive coordinator. He's taken on the defensive play calling again, and has that been effective? How has that changed with the defense? And what does this look like it's going to be promising going forward?
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest bright spot has been because the defense last year was bad, like full stop. They were not good. I would say right now, Baylor has a solid defense, and with continued development by the end of the year, we could have a good to very good defense. Defensive line is much improved. I mentioned the sacks against Colorado. Not only is Dave Aranda like doing the defensive play calling in game, and like I said, it's his scheme. It finally looks like a Dave Aranda defense that you saw like at LSU and Wisconsin, Utah State. But he's also actively coaching the inside linebackers, which is kind of like that's where he cut his teeth. And for my money, I think he's the best linebackers coach in America. And I think you've seen improvement with Matt Jones, who is our 7th-year guy, middle linebacker. And then you have Keaton Thomas, who's a JUCO transfer, who's just a dynamic playmaker and really changes that aspect of the linebacker core. And so I really like what he's done with the defense. And that's the biggest bright spot of the year so far, has been the emergence of a good, solid defensive performance overall.
So you already mentioned this earlier that the team got 8 sacks on Colorado, but there's only 4 sacks through the first 3 games. And so what is going to be the key to this team getting to Jake Retzlaff? And do you think that Baylor has what it takes to do that, to put more pressure on him?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see, because we did lose one of our starting edge rushers, Garvin Randolph, with a high ankle sprain. So he's listed as questionable. So I would doubt he plays, but we have Jacquez Evans, who's a transfer from Western Kentucky, who 2 years ago was a all-conference player. And then you have Steve Linton, who transferred from Texas Tech. He's another third school guy. He was from Syracuse to Texas Tech, and he had a huge game. Like he was, I think, PFF rated him as the number 1, pass rush as far as pressures last week. So we did this against Colorado is we played a package that we had. Normally you have what Baylor calls is the jack position, which is just an outside linebacker. So you have 3 traditional defensive linemen, maybe a nose and 2 defensive linemen, then our jack, which is an edge rusher, and our 2 linebackers. What they played against Colorado was they would have 2 of those jack edge rushers and 2 down linemen on the field at the same time, which increased, the pass rush when you're going up against a team that, like Colorado, that is not good at running the football. And you knew they were going to throw it a lot.
Yeah, did that leave Baylor open to the pass, especially against someone like Shadur Sanders?
that was the concern, because of, and I think they did pretty good overall, but you saw at the end of the game, there were lapses. Now that the game was weird because it was at the end, it was rainy and wet. Caden Jenkins, who's our best corner, slipped, and then the safety play was not desirable. The problem with that last play, I think overall they played good. It was just a little bit of failure in execution.
Okay. All right. So do you expect them to go back to that for this game, or is that kind of scheme specifically for Colorado?
I think they'll mix it in for sure.
Okay.
I don't know exactly if they'll do it like as much as they did, but they will definitely mix it in.
I mean, I imagine with Dave Aranda, he's going to throw in a lot of different types of looks to kind of confuse the offensive line.
That's what he's gonna, and you'll see that, and it's even more so. You want to give Retzlaff different looks that will confuse him in coverages and things like that. If you can force him into an errant throw or thrown into a coverage that he thinks is one way, but you're disguising it as another. Dave Aranda likes to do what they call like simulated pressures, where we show pressure, and so he thinks it's coming, then they back out into coverage, and you can trick a quarterback into throwing into a window that's not there.
Right. Very good. Well, good for Baylor. Okay, so who are some of the key players to watch for this weekend on the defense?
So, yeah, I mentioned like Keaton Thomas, Matt Jones at linebacker core, those two of our best players. I would say on the defensive line, definitely you want Trevin Mai, who went from Oregon to Baylor. He's really been good. Jackie Marshall on the defensive line. Those are two of the best players. I mentioned Steve Linton. Caden Jenkins, our best linebacker, and Carl Williams Jr., who plays the star position, which is kind of like a hybrid, kind of like a nickel hybrid linebacker safety position.
Okay. All right. So again, I'll ask what if Baylor wins, what will have gone right on the defensive side this week?
It's going to be like physical in the defensive line and pressure the quarterback, and because as good as they played, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Retzlaff isn't the level of talent that like Sanders is. And so I think that's the thing, is you want to put pressure on the quarterback, but and also we have to like stop the run. That everything on the Baylor defense is we have to control the line of scrimmage and in the run game to make BYU one-dimensional.
I don't know. Retzlaff, he's rated pretty high up there, PFF. So don't count him out. But yeah, no, I your point's taken. So okay. So is there anything noteworthy of special teams to keep an eye on?
Yeah, special teams is probably that's of the three phases. We're very good at special teams. I think I don't know if we are right now. At one point, we were number one in the conference. We did have a mishap against Utah. Had a blocked field goal, but we last week we had a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. We're on the punt team. We always get good yardage with our return game, and then coverage was great last week. So, and against Air Force, we had a punt block. So I think of the three phases of the game, special teams is where Baylor can really excel.
Okay. All right. BYU had some special teams action the last couple weeks, but I don't know if that is sustainable week in and week out. So awesome. So great. That's a really good overview of all three phases there. So now putting it all together, how do you think Baylor's going to fare in this game? Do you have a kind of prediction for the outcome?
Okay, so I am unabashedly a homer. So we're like in our little group chat with my friends. My prediction was Baylor 38, BYU 23, and there's nothing scientific about that. That was just, I was looking at, one thing I'll say about BYU is they are a very hard team to beat in Provo. That is a tough place to play. The crowd is amazing. We were on the other end of that a couple years ago when we return trip up there. So I think BYU on the road maybe.
I was just showing my kids some of the highlights from that
That was a great game. That was a great game.
It was a good game.
Like going into the year, I wasn't super high on BYU's outlook. I think I predicted about 5-7, I think is what it ended up being. They've really outperformed my expectations. Like I was worried. Me and Joe on our podcast, we are huge fans of Kalani Sitake, and we were so concerned because we thought BYU is going to have a down year, and then they were going to make a coaching change. And we love the guy, mostly because we met him at Big 12 Media Days
awesome.
last year, and we just nothing but great things to say about him. And so, but all that being said, they've had a hot start. I think it has been helped out with they played a bad BYU team. I mean Wyoming team. The first game was what, FCS? Y'all played like an FCS team?
Yeah, but I mean it's a top 10 FCS team, so they're not all created equal.
Absolutely.
Probably a tougher team than Wyoming.
Yeah, and I don't think SMU is very good, even though they just put it on TCU. But so I think they play different on the road. But I do know this: it's going to be. I know how BYU travels, so it's going to be in. I think there's going to be a big contingent for sure. So we'll have to see. I'm choosing to believe that the Baylor is going to take that loss and turn it into a positive. And also that for like we mentioned it earlier, you'd mentioned it that about the outlook for the season for Dave Aranda. This game for Baylor is an absolute must-win game. If you do want to get that 6 wins, you have to beat BYU.
Yeah, and this is I'm looking at the schedule now because you got a couple tough road games ahead of you at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, and then you get Oklahoma State at home, TCU, which even if they're looking down, that's still not going to be a gimme. At West Virginia, which that's always a tough place to play.
Baylor's never won in Morgantown.
Ever. Neither is BYU. The one time we went, I was there. I can attest to it. So, and then Houston, you're at Houston, but that one shouldn't be too bad.
Nah.
Kansas, that's looking easier, but to get 4 more wins out of that run, it's going to be tough.
We got to win. We have 8 games left. We have to win half of our games.
Yeah.
So, and you're exactly right. Looking at the schedule, like it kind of hinges on this BYU game. I think if they don't beat BYU, I don't see how you get to 4 wins. Personally.
Yeah, we're going to learn a lot about. I think both teams in this game. It feels like one of those swing games. Now, before the season, we were expecting to be 2-2 or 3-1 going into this Baylor game. So the whole thought was, this is one that we have to get in order to be bowl eligible. Now we're already ahead of schedule. So BYU is coming off of a high. We, like you mentioned, we won't be in Provo playing on the road. There's been a lot of talk about night games versus day games. I've seen some stats that kind of debunk that when you account for other things like strength of the opponent and everything. But
and the time of the game maybe plays into Baylor's favor. It's an early game. It's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be as hot as we'd probably want it to be. But yeah, so it'll be warm, but it won't be nothing too crazy.
So I mean, there's a lot of things that seem like, okay, this is a classic trap game. As we mentioned, Baylor is really feeling it, and they're going to come out really motivated. You said the team's saying the right things, so we're going to learn. Does Baylor, can they, with their back against the wall, pull it out? And then also with BYU, can you stay focused and perform like that week in, week out? Because even though Baylor is not projected to finish, near the top of the conference or anything, still not an easy team, still very competitive, and not a team that we want to overlook at all. Like I said, both teams were kind of projected right there, kind of by each other, like 13, 14 area, right? 12 maybe.
12,
so
11, 12, 13, somewhere on there.
Somewhere around there. I say I've already pushed it out of my mind. So, yeah, we're going to learn a lot because this really feels like a trap game, but it's so apparently a trap game that hopefully BYU sees it coming. And again, talk about saying the right things. They've said the right things all season, and we'll see what they have coming into this matchup, because it will be a tough one, different environment. How do you think the fans will show up? Are the fans still in it, or are the fans a little deflated?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a mixed bag. Because there is a huge contingent that didn't want Dave Aranda retained, and so like the Colorado game just kind of, they were like, "See, this is why," because it's the same thing, right? Same thing that happened last year and the year before that. So that's the thing and that's what I said afterwards. I was like, you just got to hope that apathy doesn't set in with the fan base and they don't show up to this game specifically, because you don't want it to be 50% blue and white. That's what you don't want. And I know they're going to travel well. They always do. Last time they were in Waco, BYU fans, it was, and I will say this, they're great fans, great people, super nice, always. But you still don't want half of your stadium to be the opposing team.
Yeah, I can't believe we're this far in, and just now talking about the kind of budding rivalry between BYU and Baylor, the kind of the friendship rivalry. It seems like there's a lot of mutual respect. We see a lot of each other
Yeah, for the most part, I think it's because it's from what I've seen anyway. Like there are always outliers, but they seem to be the most like friendlier fan bases as far as with opposing. Especially, I know BYU. Everyone that went to Provo, they talked about how great they had, how great everybody was, and I think it's the same way. I've heard like whenever y'all came to Waco, it's the same way. It's like, very hospitable. Y'all weren't in the Big 12 yet, but it was already like going to happen. So it was one of those like, hey, we're welcoming you in with open arms and type of thing. So yeah, the only thing I'll say is like, I absolutely hate y'all in basketball, especially last year. Like I hated BYU.
It's funny how that can change. It's kind of like with Kansas when it's football, you're like, oh, good for them for turning around. When it's basketball, you're just like, no, not at all.
It's one of those, to me, BYU is one of those teams, like the way their whole mindset. And I think it's just because of there's a maturity factor because of the nature of BYU with their players and a toughness there that gets coached in from the basketball coach to the football coach for sure. And so you don't see a lot of teams that have that level of maturity, toughness, and grit that year in and year out you see BYU have.
Well, it should be fun. It's going to be basketball will be very different this year. New head coach, a lot of new guys in, and so we'll see how they all gel. And Baylor obviously still going to be top of the conference, so should be interesting come basketball time. But yeah, it's definitely been kind of this weird kind of friendly rivalry. Certainly, I like Baylor when it's when they're not playing BYU. It's a team that's fun and easy to root for. So certainly want to see Baylor do well, especially because having you on the schedule. So yeah, it was fun playing those two games prior to coming into the Big 12 officially. Kind of felt like a little warm up and a little and so far it didn't even mention this stat, but which I hate talking about it because there's so many years in between, but we've played 4 times. We both both sides have won 2 games, both of them at home, and so this is another one at Baylor.
Yeah.
So it kind of, if the trend holds, which it's a small sample size over many years, which so ultimately means not very much, but Baylor would have an advantage in this one. So BYU fans obviously hoping that we can buck that trend and get on top of this one, but yeah, it's not going to be easy. So you mentioned BYU shows up pretty well. Can you let any BYU fans who are coming to Waco that may be there for the first time where they might need to go to try if they're looking for some food, some barbecue, whatever, while they're in town?
Absolutely. So as far as food, I'm a big fan of like George's. It's a restaurant close to campus. If you go to George's, you got to get crazy wings and have a good time. It's been around Waco for a very long time. Guest barbecue is what I would say for get some really good Texas barbecue there. And for the ladies, go out to Magnolia, go see the silos, take in the sights. That's a fun time.
You have to, right?
Yeah,
It's a must.
it's an early game. Go in the afternoon. It's gonna be a nice day. Walk around Magnolia. They have a wiffle ball field out there. Food trucks. Have a good time.
Okay. All right. Sweet. So one last question. I got to know what you had on the TV the whole time. I saw that in the background. At one point, I thought it was Avengers Endgame, but I don't think I
It's
was right.
probably Wakanda Forever.
Ah,
It's on FX. So I think it was Wakanda Forever was what was on.
okay. So there was some superhero action going on. So I
I
wasn't
will
way
say
off.
this: our podcast, we talked about it. Like we're very sports centric, but our second part of our podcast is like we're also like huge nerds. So we'll talk like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or whatever other like nerd thing that we're into, Marvel or whatever's going on. So
I love it. Me too. I can get into that, and I'm guessing a lot of BYU fans feel the same way. So perfect. I love and appreciate that aspect too. So with that, please do go check out Matt and the Bear Den Pod, and check out their Baylor content, but also their nerdy content, whatever they're into
for sure,
at the time. Again, remind us again where to find that.
you can find it on Twitter at the Bear Den Pod and thebeardenpod.com.
Great. And again, that'll be in the comments. Please like this video, subscribe, and then go check out the Bear Den Pod. And as always, go Cougs.
Sick and Bears.